When your first minute ends, one year will tap once, 1 year tap. और जो stable पे करना है, ठीक है? And when your 7th minute begins, you'll tap again. And once your time is over, you will tap twice. Okay? So be aware of that. And we're recording this today. Yeah.
The motion presented before this House today is that this House believes that social media is ruining democracy. I would first like to define some of the words in this motion. By House we mean the whole world. By social media we mean Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and all such applications. By ruining we mean that it has a detrimental effect. It is harming and affecting in a negative way. And by democracy we mean the way of governing of the people, for the people and by the people. We would like to provide a clarification before beginning, and that is that harms are also present in other all forms of media. Also, they are present in the print media and the news, television media. But more people are into social media at this time, and then the news and the print media. This medium is a major medium of political information, and social media corporations know that they can feed off this fact and make profit off for spreading political misinformation. Okay. Today we do not have the burden to provide any other alternative, but we'll prove to you how social media is ruining democracy and how social media, and we also like to state that we are not going to ban social media. Today, the status quo presented before this House is that social media is a major chunk of political opinion forming among the masses. The need of this debate is that protection of democracies, which are then tied to the lives of citizens living in that democracy. Our stance today is that how social media is very problematic for the democracies. The major stakeholders in this debate are the political parties, the citizens, and the social media corporations. Okay. We will present to you today 3 LOAs. The first one being political misinformation being spread by the social media. The second one is the creation of echo chambers. And the third one is the polarization of popular views, which will be presented by my fellow speakers. Okay. I would like to prove to you how political misinformation is being spread by the social media. It is much easier for the social media organizations to spread political misinformation because they do not have any physical platform. They do not have any regulation bodies and they have no accountability. While on the other hand, we see that in the news houses and in the media chambers of the television and newspaper, they have a certain process through which it is they are held accountable by the seniors, and there are certain organizations which hold them accountable for what they are showing to the people. We see how the social media organizations do not have any regulation and how they do not want to have any regulations in their systems. I will prove this fact to you by showing you how in the 2016 elections in America, when Trump was a candidate, who was a populist leader, who had a history of racism and sexism, used social media to his advantage and did not allow black people to vote properly. During those elections, Facebook was accused of actively suppressing black voters to give voters by not allowing them to see certain content on their social media accounts. They would not provide information about their polling booths and any other stuff. So, to prove this, to give a testimony on this, Mark Zuckerberg was called to the Congress and was invited to the Parliament, where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez asked Mark Zuckerberg that does Facebook have any methods for verifying political information being presented, and Mark Zuckerberg said that they do not have. Another question that was asked was that can black voters be actively stopped from seeing certain infos, which was replied in front. This led to the conclusion that voters of color were more misinformed about the polling stations than candidates in their constitution. Black voters were suppressed through social media, and a lot of them were not able to vote. They were not able to choose their own candidate who represented them and benefit those people. Democracy is all about choosing your own candidate who puts forward your agendas. As a result, if a certain group of ethnic community or a certain group of community is not allowed to actively participate in the voting process, this means that the system of democracy is failing and the whole process falls.
On that note, ma'am,
Yeah.
don't you think social media provides a platform for people from all communities to express their views?
Do you not think that social media only provides information to a certain group of people about what they want to see? We have also seen how Saudi government had tried to put pressure on Al Jazeera to hide Jamal al-Khashoggi's murder, who was an American journalist and lived in Turkey. And if this had been, if social media had suppressed it back because it had taken money or something from the government, but the Al Jazeera is a news channel and it did not suppress this fact because it had an system of accountability. It had to show people what the truth was. So, now I will move on to my next point of how echo chambers are created in social media. We see how when we operate Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and such stuff, when we like something, we see certain links pop up which show related stuff to us and do not show us. Then they do not show us things which are of the opposite belief. We see that how harm is mitigated in normal media, harm is mitigated in social media. We see that how in normal media, in a talk show, we see three opinions being presented to you at the same time. But other social media, you only get to see what you want to see because you only align yourself to a certain perspective, to a certain opinion, and do not get to see the other side. Majority parties cash on this, and the government parties cash on this, and because they are in a better position, they have more money and more power to make their own echo chambers. They cut down the traction on these and information are related to a certain opinion only said. We have seen this in Pakistan with how the PTI government, when it was failing to provide the people with wheat, basic necessities like flour, to the people, but they cashed on this fact because they were in power at the time. They did not allow the people to see that they were failing as a government, and they only showed how they were winning on the major economic scale and did not show us a proper picture. So we presented to you 2 points today: how political misconduct, misinformation is spread through social media, and how echo chambers are created. And we, being the proposition, are proud to be in favor of this.
First speaker side opposition. Give a speech not exceeding 7 minutes.
Starting with my negative case, I would simply rebut Eisha's case by saying that positive always outweighs negative. Social media has so much of the benefits already that it outweighs all the other means that are existing in the society which are providing us information related to different political parties. And so, as they try to show you that how social media is creating echo chambers, but no. What we are trying to tell you is that the news channel that we see nowadays, the news channels, we all know that these news channels are owned by different political parties. They are the ones on the background are controlling these political parties are the ones who have influence on these news channels, and they have these biased views, and they show you only particular information, and I am not showing you all the information that are existing. And so it's clearly obvious that these news channels are biased, and they don't show you all the things. But on the other hand, what we have is social media, on which you have a spectrum or different views available, and all these and when all the views are in front of you, then you as an individual can decide that, on your own that what's right and what's wrong. Now, moving on to my positive case. Now, what I would first we need to try to understand what democracy is. It's actually about the liberty. It's actually about the opportunity to express your opinion. It's about freedom of expression, right? So, how are we going to get this platform? Actually, social media is the only way which will provide us this perfect platform in which all the individuals living in a society will have power will have liberty, will have freedom of expression, equal opportunity, will have and so they're independent there, and nobody is going to stop them from showing their views like these news channels. So there won't be any so an individual when reads their opinion on the social media will try to analyze the pointers that are first given by these all the individuals in this by the pointers that they see on the social media. They're taking their own opinions, right? And so we can see how the social media is using this, how an individual in a society can use this ability, that the power that they have to amplify their views, and they can in general force the government and force the people or the government to make decisions or to make policies which are in their own benefit, right? And so we see that how this and what is democracy? It's about it's about people having say in how the government is run, and so they can very beneficially use or very effectively use social media. They can very effectively use the social media as a source to amplify their views and force the government to make policies that what they want in a society, right? And this is the democracy, is that people having say that how the country should be run. And so. In this, I will be presenting a very good example of Andrew Yang, which was a candidate in US. And Andrew Yang was a candidate because he was an Asian American, and so he was neglected. The news channels were actually not showing much of the information about the Andrew Yang, and even the news channel removed his name from the list of the candidates that was presented by different news channels, right? And so what happened? His supporters, right? His supporters raised voice, and in this way, the people were able to make a difference. How the supporters enforced CNN and the other news channels to apologize to Andrew Yang and in this way, this proves that how social media is so crucial for democracy.
And how does this help Andrew Yang win an election when there is continuous rhetoric against people of color?
It's not about winning election, it's about democracy. And what we are saying that Andrew Yang was elected. And so this social media in a good way helped Andrew Yang to come in front of the people, right? His supporters promoted him. And so in this way we can see that how the new parties that come into existence, and how the individual candidates who are not are helped by the news channels in their campaign, are helped by the social media, and how this is a good platform for them to show their reform, for them to represent what their plans are, and how could they be better than the other dominant political party who are there in the society and trying to yes.
Do you not think that a common man is adversely influenced by the popular belief and major political parties' media houses?
That's what I've been saying since the beginning. The news channels, what they are doing, trying to create a biased opinion of the individual, showing showing this limited information. But then in the social media, what we have a variety of opinions, variety of points that people present, and now the individual can decide for himself or herself that what's right and what's wrong, and then go for voting. And next, what we will be talking about is the accountability. that how the social media would make the government or accountable for how the government would be made accountable by the help of the social media. That Mariam will be explaining in the next, and now I'm summarizing. So we have clearly explained that how social media is very beneficial for the democratic state, because it helps people have some say in how the country is run, and that's what democracy is about, and we support democracy and its social media.
The speaker spoke for 6 minutes and 33 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not about winning elections, it is about being elected. It is about being neglected. This was a line said by the second speaker from the opposition, when we clearly have the notion that social media is ruining democracy. Where we are talking about democracy that is for the people, from the people, and by the people, that means it is about the elections, right? Starting with their negative case, half of which was clearly explained by the first speaker, but we are going to refresh our first case so that they have a better idea of what we're actually talking about. So, they came up with that how social media provides a platform for the people, how they have a freedom of expression, how they have equal opportunity, and how there is so much information on social media and it's actually beneficial for it. No, this was the first line of argument when we talked about spread of misinformation. When you have this much misinformation and this much access to how much information you can spread, it actually leads to spread of misinformation, right? Let's think of Wikipedia, right? Everyone can edit anything on Wikipedia. So how do you call that a credible source of information? When you have social media, everyone has access to say anything they want on social media. How do you suggest that is playing an active role or not doing wrong? Not right now, right? Now, the first one we talked about was spreading of misinformation. How there is information spoon on social media that it's hard for people to differentiate between truth and the lie. Number 2. The second speaker came up with the benefits of social media and how the positive outweigh the negative, where she failed to satisfy us with the power imbalances that exist. She talked about how talk shows are fairly manipulated by political parties. But madam, I want to ask you, how do you prove to me that those political parties would not also influence the social media that exists out there? How do you think that not going to affect Facebook, Instagram, or even Twitter, as they do on TV talk shows? We have clear examples in Mark Zuckerberg when Alexander Ocasio-Cortez asked him if they are stopping people from seeing certain content, and the answer was affirmative, which clearly proves that how it is actually happening. We talked about on the first line of argument. We talked about how black supporters weren't able to see certain content. As a result, they couldn't see their polling booth and was actually prevented from taking part in the election. Right? Alright. Furthermore, the opposition came up with how the general population has to say in everything, and they can say anything, and they have proper platform provided. But what we believe that the general population with this much illiteracy cannot form their own opinion, and the political parties, the social media corporation are forming their opinions for us because they can do that, right? Now, the side opposition did not satisfy us with the fact that how social media corporation have any incentive to provide us with the correct information. They can do anything they want. They don't have to regulate. They don't need to regulate, and furthermore, they don't want to regulate. They don't have any incentive to to regulate that information for us. They are making money out of it. They are getting money. They are making money. So how do you suggest that they are being beneficial to us, right? So, after talking about the negative case, we'll come to a third line of argument, that is polarization of political parties, right? Okay. We all have our own opinions, right? We do have a certain say on we do have a certain say on the current political situation. What happens is we bond over it. That is the fact that a lot of us, when we hate something, the bond grows together, right? So the polarization of political parties, when you have a view of a certain thing and you go on social media and you see other people having the same view, what happens is you go back to forming echo chambers. You go back to forming those same opinions around your head and you stop other opinions coming back to you. How do we relate it to social media? How do we relate it to talk shows? When you're watching television, when you're watching talk shows, there are always two sides of the story. If they have invited PTI, they have also invited representative from a female end to argue their case, right? So social media is actually a one-sided story where you actually have a choice to stop. You actually have a choice to not listen to the other side, right? What happens is this creates two extremes. As a result, no one is actually trying to find the real truth. Everyone is just trying to prove that their truth is the real truth. Yes,
what
ma'am.
do you have to say about the agenda setting phenomena that the news channels actually work on, or the way news channels work is agenda setting? What do you have to say about it?
I totally agree with it. I totally agree with that the news channels have an agenda onto supporting a certain side. In the same way, the social media corporation also have an agenda to do the same thing, because the social media corporation do not have any incentive to do the right thing for us, right? They are money making machine and they are going to make money out of it. So how do you suggest that if the talk show are doing it, the social media won't do it, because obviously everyone wants to make money around it, right? Bringing this up, we're going to conclude our argument as we prove that the side opposition did not really fail. All they talked about how people have a say in all the things in all social media. Meanwhile, they did not fail. They failed to satisfy us with the fact how it is actually ruining the democracy. Whereas we showed you how it creates misinformation, we showed you how it has an echo chamber and stops people from seeing the real thing, and also we showed how it creates extremist views. We also showed you how political parties are influencing, and we also showed you how social corporations are making money out of it.
I'll now call upon the second speaker side opposition. So that the case not exceeding 7 minutes. Please try to keep the door closed. Yeah.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this house believes that social media ruins democracy, and from side of opposition, we believe that no, social media doesn't ruin democracy, because we believe that the principles that democracy stands upon, freedom of expression, freedom of choice, a say of government, a say of people in the decisions made by the government, the law-making machinery, all of that, people should have a say in this. People should have a power. The common man should have the power to question the government, to hold them accountable, to have some sort of backup. We believe that that is what democracy stands for, and we believe that in a world where we have social media, that democracy is well established. We believe that social media does kind of reinforces the principles that the democracy stands on, the foundation that democracy stands on, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that the side proposition is completely confused, because the right proposition at first okay, talk shows are good because they, you have two sides of the story. But then they also concede to what Ushna said, that talk shows are when the press is biased. But then they again come up and say that no, you do have two sides of the story, but the social media is completely biased. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that in all medium, in any media that is provided, there is some sort of biasness, there is some sort of misinformation that is present. But we believe that social media is way less controlled and influenced by the political parties and those people in power. Social media does have a greater proportion of the common man being involved in it than mainstream media, and therefore we believe that the common man has a more say when it comes towards the social media, and therefore we believe that yes, there might be some biasness, yes, there might be some misinformation, because we are not painting social media as a utopia, ladies and gentlemen. We are not presenting social media as an ideal thing where there won't be any misinformation. We do agree that there might be, but we believe that it kind of the benefits of it outweigh the harms that are provided by the side proposition, and therefore we feel that that is where we win the case, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on, we would like to say that social media, she said that in talk shows we have two parties, and there's PTI, there's also PMLN. Ladies and gentlemen, if a person is so restricted in his own views, that person will always switch the channel when it comes towards a PMLN, PMLN So the thing about echo chambers and being restricted to your own views will also exist in the talk shows and the common and the mainstream media, ladies and gentlemen. That depends upon the very nature of a person, that how accepting you are, how tolerant you are, how encouraging you are, how much you really accept that biasness and that intolerance and that not listening to others' views will still exist in their mainstream media, ladies and gentlemen, which they at first to some extent portray that is biased, but then somehow agree that it is not biased. They are totally confused in their own case, ladies and gentlemen. Now, moving on, ladies and gentlemen, they said that the general population is illiterate, so they cannot form their opinions, and so they easily get biased. Well, if general population is so illiterate, then okay, why we have democracy? They portray that the general population has been illiterate and not being capable of forming their own views, so they can easily be distracted by social media, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore we feel that it is very necessary for the social media to play a pivotal role in giving that awareness, in giving that, in giving all that knowledge, the awareness, the discussion, the discourse, the political interest, creating a political interest in the common man, ladies and gentlemen, that will help people have a sense of politics, of what is happening around the world, of how governments work, of how democracies work, ladies and gentlemen. That is actually helping that illiterate population, that we do not agree with that they completely turn the whole general population illiterate, but even if we agree to their point, we believe that democracy and social media still work in our favor in the scenario that they presented, ladies and gentlemen. Now, moving on, ladies and gentlemen, they talked about democracy and elections, and we clearly told you that Andrew Yang was a presidential candidate and he was competing for elections, and we told you that how there is his graphics were not presented, and we believe that yes, this definitely does relate to democracy, but we do not understand why did side proposition they didn't understand our view. We do believe that yes, it is related to elections, it is related to democracy, and therefore example in this point is very valid, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on towards what Eisha said about fact checking on Facebook and all of that. We said that Facebook does have, it's not that there is no fact checking at all. Facebook does have links Facebook does hire people, does have its connection to an international fact checking organization that does do fact checking. But even if there is some misinformation, we told you that it does exist everywhere else, ladies and gentlemen, as well. Therefore, we believe that social media is a better way because there is more awareness, and there is moving on towards my LOA, that is accountability, ladies and gentlemen. In social media, what is a true or ideal democracy, ladies and gentlemen, where government can be held accountable, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore we believe that social media is the best way for people to amplify their views and question the government for the laws and regulations they are passing in India. That is not exist previously with mainstream with social media, and if people became more engaged in all of this, the government also actually has to think a dozen times before passing any law, because they know that if that creates anger in the masses, there is going to be a backlash, and therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that holds the government accountable, and there is more accountability. Hence, there is more fulfillment of the criteria or the basis or the principles that the democracy stands on, ladies and gentlemen, because it gives power to common man to amplify their views, to present their views, to make sure that their voices are heard. Because people, social media, people can make their voices heard, they can raise voice against influential people, against powerful individuals, and call them out for their wrongdoings without having to feel threatened, ladies and gentlemen. Because if you do so at an individual level, you actually have a possibility of being threatened as well, ladies and gentlemen. On social media, you can actually unite together and do not even be threatened or suppressed, ladies and gentlemen, which we believe is the essence of democracy, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, the dynamics completely change with the involvement of social media, ladies and gentlemen, and this is why I'd like to give the example of how the Citizen Amendment Act was introduced in India, but there was a lot of backlash because of the social media creating awareness and telling us that how the police is treating the students, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore we believe that yes, they are holding accountable in situations like Kashmir. Also, we know what is happening, ladies and gentlemen, because the mainstream media isn't showing it, but the social media is telling us about it, and this is how the power has more power, and we believe that the principles that democracy stands on are more fulfilled in a platform where we have social media, and therefore we believe that social media does help fulfill the principles and foundations that democracy stands on.
The speakers have 4 minutes and 29 seconds.
Can I time like that? Ladies and gentlemen, the whole case of like opposition was mainly based on social media being a political sciences major, ladies and gentlemen. What they believe is that social media is a portal that is going to teach people about how democracies work, how elections work, how the intricacies of legislation works, how everything works in the country, ladies and gentlemen. And as they did not contrast with our case and show to us how we clearly showed to you that that's not the case, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's see what this case boiled down to and what word they painted to us and how they tried to show to us how social media is so beneficial. Now the benefits that were showed by side opposition here, the benefits that they majorly showed to us were that people have more of a say. Freedom of speech that they believe is a pioneer for democracy to exist has been forwarded because social media exists. We believe that is not true in its essence, ladies and gentlemen. Why is that not true? Because we have seen, because the freedom of speech, they did not engage with our argument about how power imbalance exists in the world, ladies and gentlemen. They did not engage with our argument about how if I am an LGBTQ person in Pakistan, where there exists homophobia, my freedom of speech is not being forwarded by the social media, but I will be harmed by the ladies and gentlemen. I do not have the same say with social media that a Sunni, a straight male has, ladies and gentlemen. So I believe that that is the scenario that exists. Social media has continues. We see Twitter. With Twitter, we see vigilantes and existing, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, being a Muslim, if I try to propagate an idea, if I want to propagate an idea about practicing my religion as I want to, Twitter, I will see a lot of faction in Twitter actively attacking me, Twitter turning into a vigilante organization. Like, we see how I believe that is really negative factor that exists with the freedom of speech that they say. Because freedom of speech is not an absolute concept, ladies and gentlemen. We believe freedom of speech is linked with what position you have in the society. If you are a woman, you do not have the same freedom of speech in social media that a man has, ladies and gentlemen. If you are a woman, you are continuously said to go to the kitchen to make a sandwich. Because you do not have the same power to actually go out and say, because you will be continuously hounded on social media for trying to preach your opinion. So we believe that is what is necessarily wrong. And then they did not even engage with our arguments about how this, because they had to show us how this links to the democracy in itself, ladies and gentlemen, of how democracy works through elections, of how democracy works through candidates showing their mandates, ladies and gentlemen. They did not talk about that. They only showed to us how now people can speak out against governments. That is going to, and and then their argument about accountability. So there is the major clash of the debate. The major clash of the debate is either there is information from social media, either there is misinformation. And now I'll show you how there is existence misinformation, ladies and gentlemen. Now they have this argument about how accountability is coming about because we have social media, governments are being held accountable for what they're doing, ladies and gentlemen. We do not believe that's true, ladies and gentlemen. We do not believe that's true because we have actively seen Twitter trying to suppress pro-Kashmir tweets being done, blocking people that are doing the Chinese government trying to suppress the videos coming from the Uyghur camps, ladies and gentlemen. We do not believe accountability works in the same way in the scenario because democratic accountability does not come out of me sitting in my room and tweeting, ladies and gentlemen. Democratic accountability comes from democratic channels, and we do not believe that democratic channels are being helped and enabled by social media. Now let's see this major argument about how they were never able to understand that side proposition does not support news media. What we are trying to show you with the argument that political opinions are not absolute, ladies and gentlemen. Political opinions of the masses, how are they formed? Every media organization is a pipe piper, ladies and gentlemen, and those media organizations have linked to the people in power. If Trump is in power right now, Trump has the power to create a narrative, to soften his image, to create a narrative of how he's trying to protect people. A poor farmer from the US, a white farmer from the US only sees Trump as a leader who's trying to throw out these black and Hispanic people who are trying to take his job, take his benefits, take his the liberties that he has as an American man, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe that is where social media becomes really problematic because social media organizations necessarily do not have an incentive to go out and do any fact checking or provide you with the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Social media organizations are corporations, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of the day, they did not even argue the topic about profits, right? We talked about profits. We told you how profits are a major way through which media runs, ladies and gentlemen. We showed to you the media does not necessarily care. They do not care what happens to the people. They only care about how much money they make. And the money, they provide the most money, ladies and gentlemen. The person with the most power can provide the most money. And then that happened, and they did not even talk about voter suppression. And they just said that, okay, voter suppression is happening, but you can speak out about it. Okay, I'm speaking out about it, but still I am not voting. I am not getting the candidate that I wanted to get. If I wanted to be under the presidency of Hillary Clinton, I am not under the presidency of Hillary Clinton because Trump actively became the president and now his policies are affecting my life, ladies and gentlemen. And that is what democracy is about. Democracy isn't about this facade of liberalism where everyone can speak out, where I can tweet about me feeling so suppressed in homophobic environments. It's about active change coming about. And active change is not coming about by social media because the benefit that they try to show you, okay, if you concede that those benefits, some of those benefits exist in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen, they're extremely mitigated by the harms that exist, the major harm that exists because the power imbalance in the world deals with everything. The power imbalance is what shows to you what's happening in the world. The power imbalance is never even contested on, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's see what their arguments were about and what their major case was about. And then they talk to us about their both of their line of arguments were along the same line. They did not have much content to engage with the other side. They did not even engage with our argument about echo chambers. The only rebuttal we got for echo chambers was you can change the channel, ladies and gentlemen. But when we showed to you how these echo chambers are used by parties in power to power those echo chambers are actively fueled, ladies and gentlemen. Those echo chambers, if religious extremist echo chambers are actively fueled by religious parties to get more voters to vote for them, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that happens, that actively leads to minorities, not because if there are like 10 black people in a country and there are 50 white people would have a bigger echo chamber, ladies and gentlemen. That bigger echo chamber gets more viewing, ladies and gentlemen. They get more active screen time on the social media. The black people are not getting the same screen time. That is not the same level of freedom of speech that we are talking about. That's not the same level of accountability that the Uyghur Muslims are not getting the same representation that normal people are getting, ladies and gentlemen. And we do not believe social media has played any part. What social media has actively done? Social media has actively turned into a tool to control the population. They have turned into a tool in comparison with news media to control people, to form their opinions, because what active governments do, what populist governments do, what fascist governments do, they appeal to the majority views, they appeal to populist views, they appeal to views of people to get into power, and then they misuse that power, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe social media has made it pretty easy for people like Trump to get elected and misuse their power. So we believe we win the case on the ground of them not engaging with most of our arguments, us showing to you how in the real world there are impacts of social media that are extremely harmful. That's why.
The speech has over 7 minutes and 52 seconds.
So we as side proposition believe that social media does not ruin democracy. We believe that social media provides a platform for debate, discussion, discourse, and awareness. It increases the involvement of a common man and in the political system, and therefore it promotes the true essence of democracy. Now, if we look at the arguments brought up by the side proposition, there are two main, out of all the arguments, the two main arguments were about misinformation and lack of regulation. Right? So first, let us first tackle the argument that was brought up about misinformation and false news being spread through people who are in power and propaganda sharing false news can influence how people can shape the views of individuals. Now we need to realize that we do not live in an ideal world. So all forms of information, all forms by which information is shared will have some form of misinformation. No information that's provided to you is completely, entirely authentic or true, be it books or talk shows or the press media and the social media. So we all realize that all forms of media. No, thank you. All forms of media will have some level of misinformation and some level of biasness. So in the real world, you cannot completely eradicate biasness or misinformation. So if you were to say that social media is ruining democracy because it spreads misinformation or false news, then all forms of media, all forms of information, all means by which we share information that promote, that also are a threat, or that also promote misinformation should ruin democracy, right? So how does social media in particular comes into play in this argument? So we need to understand that only social media is not limited to misinformation or false propaganda. So if we look at how one forms his or her opinion is through research, right? Is reading information from different articles.
That one, ma'am.
No, thank you. And so we argue that social media provides you a platform where you can, where you are more free to research more openly without regulations. This was their point, that social media has no regulations. That can be used as an advantage, because now if we look at who regulates the normal media, we see that people in power and people who have higher political positions are people who regulate the normal media and press media. And so the fact that social media has no regulations can be used as an advantage, because now if we were, let's suppose a common man, if you were, let's imagine a world without social media. If you were a common man and you had an opinion, you would have almost zero chance of going to a television or going to a talk show and expressing your opinion. Now that you have social media, you can create a post with enough research that can and then this post. No, thank you. This post can go viral, and now you have the power to express your opinion, and that is what democracy is. And so they give.
And what does side opposition have to say about social media being a major form of information that people are taking in, and then social media having its own biases?
Okay. So yeah, we do believe that social media is a major form of information, and we believe that is an advantage, more of an advantage than a disadvantage, because we as side opposition understand that all forms of media will have misinformation and all forms of media will have misinformation, and media that is regulated by people in influence are a greater threat to democracy, because they hold more power in shaping one's opinion, because they're regulated by people in power. And so they give an example of how talk shows will have two sides, and they completely forgot about social media having comment sections and statuses for general public. And so, and so if you see an article on social media, you will have hundreds of people stating their opinions and also sharing relevant information that supports their opinions, and this cannot be done through a talk show. And so this is actually promoting the true essence of democracy. We believe that now that we have social media, we can actually have a democracy where every individual's opinion, regardless of how powerful or how less powerful they are in the society, is counted. They also talked about how opinions are how freedom of speech is limited to people who are in power. And so let's imagine a world without social media. Do you not believe that a world, and so they give an example of how women are, the opinions of women are not valued in the current status quo. And so if we imagine a world without social media, we realize that in that world, the opinions of women will be less counted, because again, the regulation are from political authorities. And now that we have social media, we believe that the conditions of although they're not perfect, but the conditions of women and the conditions of and women empowerment is more aided through social media than without social media. And so they also talked about echo chambers, and so we need to realize that there's something known as confirmatory bias, where people will only read and research about things or buy books of things that they already believe in. So if someone's against feminists, they're more likely to buy books or watch documentaries that are against feminism. And someone's pro-feminist, they will read and buy books that are in favor of feminism. So these echo chambers are actually in the real world unavoidable. They will be formed with or without social media. And if we have social media, we see, as I stated earlier, that we see that if you have an article that is against a certain topic, you will have hundreds of people that will support, that will provide arguments for that topic. And so these echo chambers are actually, this imbalance is actually decreased through social media. And I will now, how much time do I have now? Okay, how much time do I have? Okay, I would quickly just repeat my lines of arguments. We talked about how social media provides a platform for every common individual to voice their opinions, and we talked about how with social media the world is a better place, because now we can hold people accountable, and not just normal people, but people who are actually in power accountable for their wrongdoings, which was not possible without social media.
Come on.
The speakers focus on
मुझे भी जाना था मुझे भी जाना क्या ना
Before they leave, clapping for everyone. So we are going to have an audience vote. Audience vote देख लेते हैं. Because I want it to be captured on video. हाथ raise करना. देखो मरियम audience vote तो